Some would say I'm the Reverse, and welcome to my review for The Flash, Season 6, Episode 7, titled The Last Temptation of Barry Allen, Part 1. So let's just get into my general thoughts right away. I thought this was easily the best episode of the season. Just one of the best episodes of the entire series, to be honest. This was an incredible episode in every way. I can't think of something that I would dislike about this episode. Um, let's just go in right to plot number A, or letter A, whatever you want to call it. The main plot of this episode. So, the plot revolves around Barry and Bloodwork, but it starts with Barry and Ralph, straight from last week's ending, where he got tackled off the rooftop by Bloodwork, and it started with a scene of them falling, fighting through the air. I thought this was, I thought the scene itself was a cool scene because they were using similar powers. Obviously, Ralph has his elongated powers, like he has had for the longest time on the show, and Ramsey has a plethora of different abilities, different things he can do with his powers. But one of them that we've seen over the past few weeks is his Spider-Man-like arms that he uses with his black, like blood substance. And he uses that against Ralph, and it's really cool because it's like a dark parallel of Ralph's powers. And yeah, overall, just a really cool scene to start off the episode. The CGI was a little bit iffy on the scene, but it wasn't terrible. I think if maybe they made the scene a little bit darker because it was at nighttime and it was a little bit light for a nighttime scene. If they made it a little bit darker, hided some of the imperfections, the scene could have looked a little bit better. But the scene itself, if you don't really worry about the visuals of it, it was a pretty cool scene, and it ended up them fighting in the street, and basically Ramsey infects Ralph with his blood, and then Killer Frost, once Ramsey swings away, Killer Frost breaches in, and she brings Ralph to Star Labs, and they're working on him on the medbay bed, and they can't do anything because, she can't freeze it out of him, and there's nothing that Caitlin can do, so uh, Barry has to get his blood into Ralph, so he has to phase it in him, though, because I think the explanation Cisco gave was that his skin cells were elongated or elasticized, so a needle couldn't penetrate the skin. So Barry had to phase it in there, and basically they just had a blood transfusion so Barry could give him some of his blood, so the speed healing could save Ralph. Um, and I'll talk more about that scene later. But eventually, Ralph gets transported to a secure medical facility. I think Argus was who moved him. So that was the extent of him in this episode. He wasn't in the episode at all after this. But yeah, Barry goes back to his apartment, and he finds Ramsey there, and he tries to attack Ramsey. Well, let's talk about their conversation a little bit. Ramsey knows he's the Flash. Ramsey knows about the crisis. Ramsey asks Barry, um, what role do I have to play in Crisis? And Barry says he doesn't have a role because he wasn't there in any of the timelines. So obviously we knew that Ramsey was going to be stopped before the crisis, presumably next week. Well, obviously it has to be next week, next week's episode. But yeah, this just further confirms it. Yeah, Ramsey, it seems, isn't in the crisis, which makes sense because he'd realistically be stopped before then. But but Barry tries to attack him, phases right through him because obviously Ramsey's just in his head, and he breaks this vase. And this seems like kind of an insignificant little, just a little moment that happened, but it's actually a visual cue that they use later to sort of tell Barry that he is out of the vision, and I'll talk about that later. So he tries punching Ramsey, goes right through him. he hits a vase down and it shatters. So, yeah, and then Ramsey says it's the end of the world. Barry looks out the window and the antimatter is destroying Central City. So obviously this is basically, it's just Barry's worried about the crisis, because this episode actually takes place 2 days before the crisis. So crisis is like in the front of Barry's head, right in the front of his mind, thinking about crisis a lot now. So yeah, this was just him worrying about the crisis, and because it's all in his head, he's creating this own reality inside his head, just based on his insecurities um, and what he's worried about. So, but it's still a really really cool scene. But what's the next scene? I think, yeah, he basically wakes up and then he goes back to Star Labs, and he talks to Caitlin, or Frost, about it, and she does some tests on him. He has nothing wrong with him, nothing wrong with his mind. He's not going insane or anything. But then he goes back to his apartment. He's pouring like this glass of water, and he passes out again. So or actually no, he turns around. His body basically falls over, and he drops the glass of water. But to him at first, he sets the glass down and he turns around and his mother is there. She's the Speed Force this time, and she's talking about how Ramsey wants to take over his body. That's what Ramsey's goal is. So obviously we see this near the end of the episode. I'll talk about that later once we get there. And we see this for next week's episode. All the negative Flash stuff we've seen over the past few weeks and set photos and stuff. We know about the negative Flash and him getting taken over by Bloodwork. We already saw all that. So it's not necessarily a surprise. But what is a surprise is the temptation that Barry actually has, which is what the last temptation of Barry Allen actually is. That's what it actually means. Which, no one really knew what the meaning of that title is, but it surprised me that it was actually the temptation of him giving in to Ramsey and willing to give himself up to Ramsey. But yeah, his mom tells him about that. He basically he just goes through a bunch of these different like areas. He goes and looks. He's like in this fictional speed lab area where he sees all these gravestones of everyone who's died. I saw Eddie in there. I saw Martin Stein. I saw Leonard Snart. I saw both Noras. And then Barry Allen is one of them. I bet there was Henry Allen in there that I didn't see. I bet there was like who else? Ronnie and HR and just everyone who's died. I don't know. I didn't see them in there, but they were probably somewhere in there in the scene. I didn't really. I only saw a few of the gravestones, but they were probably in there as well. But yeah, he walks through the door into another scene, which is probably the saddest scene in this episode. He finds a baby Nora, and he's trying to grab her, but obviously it's part of his mind, so he can't really interact with it. And this was just really sad because, as we all know, this is 2 days before the crisis, so even if he, impregnates Iris, he won't be alive for that, or at least that's what he thinks. Obviously, Barry will survive through the crisis once the actual crisis happens, but to him, he doesn't know that. He thinks he's gonna die, and he's never gonna see Nora. Nora West Allen, obviously, not Nora Allen. And yeah, this was just a really sad scene. Probably one of the saddest scenes this season. Doesn't even compare to the Joe scene, the Joe heart-to-heart scene we got. That was week 4. That was There Will Be Blood. Yeah, it's episode 4. but it was still very, very sad. Um, and then we also had this dinner scene where Barry sort of entered through, and he was in Joe's house, or where Barry grew up with Iris and Joe and them. I love that house. It's just a classic Flash set that they always used it in it specifically in earlier seasons. I just love that house and every scene that goes on in it because they always used that house in earlier seasons. They kind of strayed away from it. Um, Especially this season, there's not a lot of scenes in that house, which I don't really like because I know it's just a house, but it's actually a super nostalgic like area for the show. It's just a classic set that they don't use as much as they did before, so it was cool until they started cutting open some weird blood-filled lasagna, and they had their black teeth, and they were dripping blood out of their mouths. Then it wasn't as cool as I thought it was. Um, it this scene, um, it's not a bad scene. It's a really cool scene. Like just the premise of it. It's just so like it's such a weird scene. Um, and it just came out of nowhere. It's a like again, it's a good scene. It's just so weird and it's like I don't know. It's gross. It's pretty gross. He's like cutting open the lasagna and a bunch of like that black substance is just pouring out. I don't know. It's a good scene, but it's really gross and frankly pretty funny. That this it's super weird scene just comes out of nowhere. But it had a really cool premise, and I think they did it really well. And it was really weird. They were just all eating it. Joe, Cisco, Frost, Ralph, Iris. Oh, Ralph actually. Now that I think of it, he came back in the scene. It wasn't actually him, but um, that segue. But yeah, they were just eating the blood on their plates and enjoying it. It was funny. Um, but there's just a few more scenes. There's this one where he's like in this weird like foggy area, and he's turning around, and each member of Team Flash is there, telling him like what will happen basically. The bad things that'll happen once he dies in Crisis, like Joe was like, "Your city will burn." Iris was like, "You left all of us." Ralph says something too. I can't remember what Ralph said. Or oh yeah, Ralph said, "We all died," uh, or something like that. And this was a pretty cool scene because I don't know. It strikes home the temptation that Barry has to survive, because obviously he doesn't want to survive just because of selfish reasons. He wants to survive so that he can continue to protect people and be there for his family, and not he doesn't want to leave Iris and leave the team. Um, and this just strikes home that idea that he doesn't want to go quite yet. Which leads into probably the best scene of this episode, which is Barry with his mother and Barry with Ramsey, those three in Barry's childhood bedroom. This was so awesome. Barry was just screaming at the Speed Force. His mother, obviously, is the Speed Force. He was just screaming at her, calling her out for everything. You're using me. I've been a tool. And he goes on about how, you know, the, like the lightning bolt. He was struck by lightning. It didn't choose him. This was done to him. This was an amazing scene. A great acting done by Grant Gustin. Some of his best work on the show, by far. This was such a cool scene. It really shows that when he wants to be angry, he can be angry. And then there was Ramsey, um, trying to convince him to basically let Ramsey control him. And the Speed Force was there saying, "You need to die. These are universal stakes. You need to die to save the multiverse." And then Ramsey was saying, "You can save, you can save the multiverse, but also survive using my cells. And just a great scene. And then it was awesome when Ramsey extended his blood to Barry on right onto his arm, and then the Speed Force like extended this lightning on Barry's other arm, and he was pulling on him from both directions, and it was such a cool scene. Barry was obviously super conflicted, and they made it look like he got through this little infection that he had, and but obviously once he escaped, you could tell that he was different. He was colder, and he just was not as joyous as he usually is. Even though it is 2 days away from Crisis, he wasn't Barry Allen. And at first I thought like, is Ramsey controlling him? Is that Ramsey? But I think it might be Ramsey, but it might just also be like Ramsey's controlling him, and it's just like a separate entity that's being controlled. I don't know for sure, but um, yeah, Barry. It seems that he's freed, and Cisco's like, dude, you just beat a sentient infection and stuff. I think that's how he worded it. I can't remember. And they really made it feel like he beat it, and I was like, at first I was thinking he seems weird. I don't know. He might just be like sad. Um, but then at the end of the episode, when Iris comes there, realizes there's something wrong, she tells Cisco and Caitlin, that's not Barry. They go up. He turns around. He's smiling with his blood-filled mouth and his black eyes. And then he speeds off with gray lightning. And he's speeding through the streets. He runs up, meets with Bloodwork. You see behind Barry, who obviously has the black teeth, black eyes, everything. The the black the like black lines on his symbol, on his belt, on his wrist, on his like fingertips, everything. He's just full on Bloodwork Flash, the one that we saw in the set photos. It's coming true. This is a great ending to the episode. But you see behind Barry on the wall this huge monstrous shadow stretches down, and then we see that it's Ramsey in his monstrous Bloodwork form. They don't show it; they just show the shadow. We're obviously gonna be seeing this next episode. We saw some set photos a few weeks back of Barry fighting this Abe Lincoln monster looking thing. It's just this huge like black, or it was this dude with this black suit on, huge top hat looking thing on his head. Obviously it's just a CGI stand-in, so I'm really intrigued what we'll see next episode. I'm kind of worried about how the CGI will look. Uh, it's a nighttime scene, so I'm pretty confident that that will help, especially because the effects for Bloodwork is black. So it'll be pretty straightforward. CGI will be easier because it's black. It's nighttime outside, and I just hope they actually use that to their advantage and make the scene look good. Um, because I feel like they've been saving up their budget for Crisis, because the effects feel a little cheap. Like, some effects are all the way there, they look great. Some effects are just not there. Um, Including the beginning scene of this episode, like I said. But I'm kind of it's a nighttime scene, so I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how that turns out. But a scene I forgot to talk about was a very important scene in Barry's transformation into uh, actually accepting Bloodwork, like taking him over. Um, when he was yelling at the Speed Force, confronting her about everything, he he reverse flashes her. Basically, he phases his hand right through her heart, and she falls on the ground. She's holding her heart, and has the same face that Nora was doing when Reverse Flash killed her. It cut back to that scene, him with the knife stabbing her. I thought this was such a cool scene, just because it shows that like this tiny encounter with Ramsey just completely changed him, and like Ramsey was able to manipulate his mind super quickly. This was the Capuchon episode of Flash. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's season 5, episode 17 of Arrow, when Oliver is being held by Prometheus, where he screams, "I wanted to, and I liked it," about why he kills. It's, yeah, that great scene on Arrow. This was that episode of The Flash, except the difference is Barry gave in, and this scene was an important step. He basically killed his own mother. He literally he took the role of the Reverse Flash and killed his own mother in this scene, and it was incredible. I was like, what the frick is going on? And I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. Like, they're going this far to make Barry, like, under the control of Ramsey. Like, they're going all out, and I absolutely loved it. Which is something I could say about the entire episode. But let's talk about the second plot of the episode. I took so long to talk about this first plot. I was about ready to finish this review off. I realized I haven't even talked about any of the Iris stuff, any of the Nashwell stuff. I haven't talked about nothing. This is going to be a pretty long review, I can already tell. But let's talk about the B plot. We have Iris and Allegra. They're going to investigate the shady organization, the Black Hole organization. They go and confront the dude that we saw next to Esperanza when she was in her coma. We saw him at the gala last week. They confront him. He pulls out a business card and he says he's part of this company that basically he's like an Uber for rich people. He brings like just like I don't know, the property of rich people. He drives them around and stuff. I don't know. It's obviously a cover up for a shady organization. So I don't know for sure what's going on there. But later he is killed. They go back. Iris, Allegra, and Camilla. They all go back, and he's killed. And Joe is saying they looked on the security footage. There was nothing. No one went in or out of the building. He's just dead. It was like he was killed by a ghost. I think that's how Joe put it. So, I think this is probably the doing of the main villain of the second half of season 6. Maybe it's a speedster, maybe it's like Godspeed. If you research the Black Hole organization in the comics, apparently they had something to do with Godspeed, so maybe he's like the leader of them or something. Because obviously we had the Godspeed stuff in episode 1 that they still haven't resolved, so obviously they're waiting until 6B. If you don't know what that is, that's the second half, 10 to 22 of season 6. They're waiting until 6B to cover that. So maybe he's the main villain. Maybe it has something to do with Mirror Master. If you don't know what the whole Mirror Master situation is, this actress just got cast as Eve McCullough. I think that's how you say the last name of that character. Basically, Evan McCulloch is the Mirror Master from the comics. Eva is a gender-bent version, so maybe people are saying that she might be the main villain of season 6. It might be her that basically killed this dude. Maybe, like, I don't know, she bent the mirror dimension onto him to kill him or something. I don't know what's going on. But, yeah, I think it definitely has something to do with the main villain of 6B, which obviously we don't know who that is yet. Maybe it's Godspeed, maybe it's Mirror Master, maybe it's Red Death, maybe it's someone new we haven't even heard about, maybe it's the Reverse Flash. We have no idea. But obviously, I think this Black Hole organization, this guy getting murdered, this invisible person who killed them, or if they're super fast, I don't know. It all has to do with the main villain story arc of the second half. So, but we also had a second sort of Iris Allegra plot. Allegra, obviously she found out about Barry being the Flash. She also found the new Crisis article on Iris's computer, pre-written. Well, not pre-written. The headline's there, and the picture is there, Iris writes it near the end, but she confronts Iris about it. The date says December 11th, and yeah, she's writing it before it even happens. So, and she was putting it off because she obviously doesn't want to believe it. She's not ready to believe that Barry's actually gonna die in 2 days' time. So, um, but yeah, this was a sort of like a C plot. This was sort of a B plot within a B plot, if you want to put it that way. Sort of a second Iris storyline with Allegra. But not much there. It's just a little bit of crisis stuff. Um, it didn't really need to be there, but I'm glad it did. It actually like gave Iris like it actually shared some of her feelings about Crisis without even her saying anything. So yeah, but she writes it near the end. She's talking about the streak in her first article. Or Allegra's talking about her. That's how Allegra wanted to be a reporter and all that. Just really small couple scenes in the storyline, uh, and a welcome inclusion into the episode. And then we have sort of a D plot, which is just one scene. Nash Wells goes down to the Monitor's little sewer base, and he uses this weird UV ray jackhammer, is what it looked like, and he just pounds the heck out of the wall, just clears all the rock. We have those little symbols. I don't know. I don't really know what those symbols were. It probably means something within the DC universe. I'm not quite sure. I haven't really. I have a feeling I've seen them before. I just don't really recognize them. If you don't know what I'm talking about, they're those symbols on the doorway into the into the Monitor's base, and I really don't know what that. We'll have to wait and see until next week. That's probably when they're gonna open it, or when Nash is gonna open it. If you saw those Crisis teasers, that area, where Black Lightning's talking to everybody, that just that area that looked like it was in some sort of um, like crisis hub, crisis base. I don't know. It really looked like that was in the sewer. I bet that's what that area is gonna be. So I don't know if they're gonna open it next episode. Maybe they're gonna open it in the Supergirl episode. Maybe they're gonna wait until the Flash episode to open it, and all that footage from the teaser trailers is from the Flash episode and beyond. I don't know, but I'm just really excited for next week's episode, and really excited for Crisis. So hope you guys enjoyed my review. I'm I'll give this episode like a 9.8 out of 10, maybe even a 9.9, straying towards that 10. This was an incredible episode of The Flash. I'm so hyped for next week and how it's going to close off this arc, how it's going to complete this two-part mid-season finale. Like, I'm I'm like blown away by this episode. The best episode this season, best episode in a long time. Probably best episode since Enter Flash Time, maybe even better than Enter Flash Time. I'm just blown away. I hope you guys enjoyed my review. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Put your put your opinion on the episode, what you liked, what you disliked. Put it all in the comment section. I really want to see what you guys think about this episode. I I really don't think I can't even like fathom what you could dislike about this episode. So if you have something though, put it in the comments. I'm eager to see what everyone thinks about the episode. And just like I said, super excited for next week's. Super excited for Crisis. Uh, this episode actually got me really hyped for the second half, and that black hole main villain arc of the second season, or the second half of the season. Um, just yeah, just such a good episode. So yeah, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. See ya.